We have a couple characters sent in by Xavier Gibbons, otherwise known as Tatami Chaos, over on the live streams. Xavier says, I finally got back to doing some sculpting after a long intermission. I had to do an animation for a skill test, and have gotten through to the interview phase. The interview phase. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. The two characters I'm sending over were characters I designed and sculpted for use in that animation. We have Chloe and Reed. I'm guessing that this one is Reed. I believe that is correct. Chloe is a cute... Let's see, where's Chloe? There's Chloe. Let's do this. Do one of these shebangs. Chloe is a cute kid rapper who's partnered with Reed, a keyboard and guitar player. I'm not sure what exactly I want feedback on, but I did find the hands. So the hands here are something that you found, it sounds like. All right. And figuring out especially Reed's extreme proportions, namely the neck and collar area, are difficult to figure out. I don't expect both to be looked at. Whichever one you think I may need more help with works well for me. It's cool that you offer feedback like this at all. Thank you greatly for this, and thank you again for being an amazing content creator. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you, Xavier. Well, I guess let's just... I have this one pulled up already, so let's just go ahead and start looking at Reed here. And then I think a lot of the feedback is going to be pretty similar between the two of them, but we can maybe do a quick little look-see here at both. So you've done some really cool stuff here in 2D that just didn't come across all the way into 3D. And I think you've made some improvements on this in 3D that didn't exist in 2D. So I think there are some good things here that didn't necessarily transfer over to here, and I think there are some other good things here that you might have plussed up from your original 2D concept. Let's first just talk about some of the hits and breaks that you kind of missed that I think would really improve your character. Specifically, one of the first things that I noticed was your face, and just kind of how it has this really kind of pointed chin, and I think it's this kind of really cool face. I think you got like a really cool effect going on here. Creates this nice stylization, but you've kind of missed some of the angularity that you have in your character's jaw. So for instance, if we want to get some of that back in here in the 3D, I'll just start by pinching up this jawline and really trying to exaggerate that plane break that we see happening there. I think it creates this really cool effect, and really with just a few strokes, it makes that jaw go from feeling soft, rounded, and undefined to purposeful, and having this kind of really cool, sharp effect there. And unfortunately, I didn't have symmetry on, but that's not important. We'll deal with it. We'll just work on this one side. Same thing here in your neck. I think you could really like sharpen up your sternocleidos here coming down if you want to get like a really sharp, cool plane break, and just start to like pinch that up and really kind of exaggerate some of this form change here. You got some cool stuff here, but a lot of it feels unintentional. We never want to have anything that makes somebody guess to say like, no, did they mean to do that? Did they not mean to do that? We want everything that people look at to be like, oh, that's really cool. That they definitely like that was purposeful. There's a hard edge there, you know, they meant to do that. Similarly, we can see some more definition down here in the knee, whereas yours just kind of softly rolls down and around. I have a lot of feedback, I think, just on your clothes in general, in terms of the folds here feeling a bit kind of random around here and undefined. For this as well, I would also say that you probably want to start thinking about seams, and what I recommend for clothing a lot of the time is looking up some texture patterns, some clothing patterns, some sewing patterns, so that you can figure out where those seams exist and then represent them more accurately here in 3D. So I can see that you've very lightly started to sculpt in some of this, but I would say you'd probably want to push that quite a bit further so that it's actually visible. Not only that, but the way that pants work, and this is why I recommend looking up the sewing patterns, or just grabbing a pair of your own pants. I would hope that you own a pair of pants, at least one. Just kind of start looking at that and figuring out how these are sewn together. You know, there's typically some form of a flap overlaying here, And, you know, just play around with that, take a look at that, and begin to start pushing that to the next level. And obviously, from a distance, it'll start to read a lot better as well. Some of the folds here feel really awkward and unintentional. You would never see folds like this at the back of that crease for the pit of the leg here. Not the pit, the I don't know what you call it. Isn't this called like your weenus or something? So this is your leanus, your leg weenus. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Either way, I would start kind of reassessing some of the information that you have here. I think some of the shapes here are fine, but the way that you've done them feels very awkward. So look at some reference, try to figure out exactly what you can do here to make it feel like there's more of, more of a crease kind of, well, that's terrible. More of a crease down into that area, and then the fold is wrapping around it. You have a lot of this kind of like basic principles of sculpting folds down. Like a lot of the time you're going to see a lot of V shapes or diamond shapes. So that's one thing that you want to pay attention to. I would just say pay better attention to where those folds are going to exist. A lot of the folds feel pretty heavy-handed and awkward in a lot of places, like up here. I really don't think a lot of this is necessary. I don't think it would be quite this baggy or have this many folds up in this area. And then as it kind of wraps up into the crotch, it just feels really awkward, right? It's really flat through here in his gooch, I guess. really flat and just kind of squared off. And it goes from like super foldy area to no fold land at all immediately, and that's just an awkward kind of feeling in transition. So if you do want to have a lot of these baggy kind of folds up here, just make sure that you're integrating everything well, so it just doesn't go from flat to master fold land, right? So pay attention to that. I think you got some of the same stuff going on up here in the jacket. I would maybe consider, I noticed some of this is a little messy. If you're having trouble with this, I recommend probably just remeshing this. Here, you know what? So because this is so messy, I'll show you a little trick here. You have this crazy edge going on here that was cut off, that you just sliced all the geometry off. And I would spend some time to clean this up more so that I could extract it better after I did this, because these areas are going to cause some issues. But go down here into Edge Loop, click on Group Loops. Do this with, oh, okay, I see. You have that hidden. I understand. All right, I'm going to run a delete hidden. Then we're going to do a group loops with just the default settings. And what you'll see happen here, if I zoom in, your geometry will go from this kind of crazy jagged edge, and it looks like you've cut this fairly well along an edge loop, but if you do have any of that jaggedness, it will clean that up for you. And then after you do that, whoops, I didn't mean to click that again. Give that a second to calculate. Undo. And then after you've done that, what I recommend doing is just remeshing this pretty low to where you can still retain the form. If you really want to keep your folds here, you can duplicate the model, remesh, and then project. So I've just done that now. So here we have this model, and we can start subdividing that up and projecting that. But what I recommend doing is just adding a little bit of thickness to this model. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. One of my favorite ways is to use the extrude all polygons function. And just click and drag in here, also paying special attention to how thick this needs to be for this jacket. So probably a little bit more thick than that, but all of your articles of clothing are going to be a little bit different. So this is something that you definitely want to pay attention to and try to get right. Going to make all this stuff, this plus the seams and really working on those folds a bit more will help you get up to the next level. That plus paying attention to some of the stuff here in terms of hits and breaks, exaggerating some of those creases, I think you can start to take this up to the next level. Another example of kind of ignoring hits and breaks here that I think is a little unnecessary. If we look at the silhouette for your character, you have kind of this straight line coming down into your little gobbler here. Let me grab our face. So I would maybe try to get that a little bit more accurate to what you're seeing there. I think that feels a little bit nicer, like a little bit of a cleaner shape. So play around with that. from the front view, this starts to have some really strong shadows, and that detracts from the face. So that's not something that we typically want to do. So I'd say play around with that a bit more. And then looking at the back of the neck, we come down. There's a pretty tight crease there, so that's probably something that you want to get in as well. And that doesn't have to be quite as tight. You know, you can sit here, smooth this out, work on that a bit more. Play around with it. Your head's a little crazy, but you know what? I think it kind of works with this character, with the stuff that you have going on. I think there's some good stuff going on here. I would say pay attention to some of the things that I just pointed out here in the face as well. Really just kind of paying attention to making things feel intentional and looking for some areas where you can exaggerate some of those plane changes and sharpen some of that form up. Alright, cool. Let's take a look at your other character here very quickly. So here we kind of have the opposite going on in your character's forms compared to the last dude. He was really sharp. He had a lot of these kind of angular pieces to him, whereas this character is obviously very round. I would say that there are probably some areas here in the cheeks, kind of wrapping all the way around the face, where you could exaggerate that a bit more, but still you want to have a fairly defined jawline. I would say that, you know, you don't want to sit here and like pinch this up as much as you did with the last character, but what you should start to do is at least pinch that up a little bit so that you can figure out where that exists, get that a little bit better, start to get some more volume in here, and then you can go back through and start to soften this form up. And after a little bit here, start to round that out just a bit more. I'll talk more about your face since I didn't do that too much on the last dude. I think you have the same stuff going on in terms of hits and breaks on this character and just clothing folds in general that I would pay attention to. I think you have some cool stuff going on down here in your shoes. I think there's some nice kind of forms going on here. I would say just try to match a little bit more closely to what you've sketched in. I think that kind of fold pattern would look a little bit more closer to what I would expect down here as compared to this, which feels a little loose and not very much like fabric. So up here in your face, since we'll talk more about this, let's just keep playing around here with rounding that out, making that feel a little bit better. From the profile, things start to get really flat really quick as compared with your reference here. So let's look at how we can correct that. Your mouth comes forward quite a bit more. This part of your face comes forward quite a bit more in your 2D concept there. And let's also add some form down here. I don't know what that voice was. I'm sorry. So we'll start to connect that neck into the head and jaw a little bit better. And start to work on blending some of that. Losing a lot of depth here in the eyes, which is very unfortunate. Eyes are really tough, but I think you got some good stuff going on here with this lid attachment. I think the shape is pretty close. I think they could be a little taller. You could probably mess with this lid a little bit more. I think you got kind of the basic roundness down pretty well though. So what I'm seeing here is we want quite a bit more depth here from the profile. So let's look at this area just very quickly. I don't know how this geometry is split up. Is this... Alright, that's a little high res. That's okay. So starting to pull back on that. I'm guessing your eyes are a little flat. They are. So you might... You know what? I think this is fine. I think you can get away with this. But I would just say start playing around with this depth. Starting to get that to feel a bit better from the profile. I think that already starts to read a bit better from the side view. That's something that you want to look at though. Rolling up and around the head. Might want to flatten some of this out. Maybe start to turn this shape a little bit faster. Probably have to readjust your hair and hat and some of the other stuff you got going on up there. Brows as well, just make sure everything's fitting well. it looks like you start to lose some of the roundness of your head shape here from this angle. So make sure that you're looking at these extreme angles because you're really starting to get like this kind of pointed effect here. So really looking at those top down, you kind of got the same thing going on in the back of your head here, this really sharp point. So looking at those extreme angles, trying to find where that feels weird from those other angles will help to explain why things feel weird from, you know, straight on or the profile, and you can't figure out why. It's probably you're not getting a full view of the shape and you just need to understand that a bit more. Cool. Well, I think that's starting to feel a bit better here in the face in terms of the larger shapes. In terms of the nose and lips, I mean, obviously you can do quite a bit more here, I think, with defining some of this form. It's very loose right now, just kind of sketched in. But I would recommend, you know, taking the time to make a mouth bag. I think it'll help you a lot, get you a lot cleaner form down here, and just start playing with some of this. We can start kind of rounding some of this out up through here into the nose. And we'll just kind of pinch this out up top and then slowly roll that pinch out. I've talked about edge quality, I think, quite a lot, but essentially we never want a stroke or a hard edge feeling the exact same all the way throughout. I would actually consider remeshing this entirely, as the geometry isn't really helping you out. I would say do that after you add the mouth bag though, because you're going to be stretching and possibly slicing stuff up all the way throughout, playing around with that. But yes, I think that'll be enough to kind of get you started, pushed in the right direction. Again, for the other dude, a lot of my feedback was just kind of playing around with these folds, start thinking about stitches and seams, try to get those more accurate to real life. It'll make them feel more like they actually exist instead of just kind of slapping some geometry on him. Try to add some thickness to some of these to get them feeling even more closer in that regard. Think about hits and breaks, trying to tighten up some stuff like his jawline and fixing some stuff in his neck that we saw in the 2D concept on this girl. Same basic feedback. I think there are some kind of silhouette changes that you can affect and play with, as well as the face to kind of start pushing that a little bit closer towards appeal and closer to what we see in your 2D concept. But I think you've done really good on the combination here of both the 2D and 3D. I think the only other thing you mentioned was the hands, which I'll say I have a bunch of videos of me sculpting hands. I would say maybe check out my Android 17 live stream. I've gone through and sculpted the entire character live, and if I remember, I'll link that below, specifically to the hand one if I can. But check that out. I think there's a lot of stuff to do with hands and a lot of improvements that you can make here in both of your characters' hands. They feel really kind of bad in a lot of ways. But hands are a character unto themselves, and I think we've spent enough time here. So good luck to you, and good luck with your hands and everything else. Cool.